Welcome to the Trailblazer Talks podcast. I'm your host, Courtney Hope Jones. This podcast is designed to encourage and equip you to be a trailblazer right where you are, to help you discover your God-given purpose and bring you talks each week that will inspire you to do what you were made for. So let's get into this week's episode. Hey guys, welcome back to the Trailblazer Talks podcast. I'm your host, Courtney, and I have a lot to catch up on you guys with because it has been quite a while since we last spoke, and I accidentally ghosted you all at the end of season 3 because so much was going on in my life, and I definitely did not intend for season 3 to end as abruptly as it did. But now that it's been like a year and a half or so, we're back, and now I'm adding video to the podcast so I can post them on YouTube as well. And I'm excited for all that season 4 is going to hold. But real quick, just let's catch up because I know that it's been quite a while since life has happened, and I've had a lot of life changes in the midst of the time from season 3 till now, season 4. So if you keep up with me on Instagram, you probably know where my life has been and what's been going on for the past year and a half. But if you haven't and you only listen to me here on the podcast, here's the lowdown. So basically, let's see, I think our last episode that you guys would have heard and tuned into was in the early spring or mid-spring of 2023. And it's now January, end of January of 2025. But yeah, so basically 2023 was a wild year. My job changed a lot and got a lot harder in a lot of ways, just with job duties and leadership changes and a lot of different things going on. And I was not able to take on everything I was doing outside of work. I had to make some choices. And on top of that, I got engaged in May of 2023 on Memorial Day weekend. And that was super exciting. And then we started wedding planning mode. And so I was working crazy hours with my job and then also planning a wedding. And we decided to get married that year. And so we decided on December wedding of 2023. So we ended up getting married in Chattanooga, Tennessee at this gorgeous venue that is a little white chapel, my dream wedding venue, in December 16th of 2023. In the midst of that, my now husband had a job change. So we used to live in Fayetteville, North Carolina, and now we live in Columbus, Ohio. And in the midst of that, I also have had a job change in 2024. So as you can see, I've had quite a lot of life going on, unintentional break from the podcast and writing and all the things that I do online. But now I'm back and I want to dig in a little bit more to this and catch up with you guys on this episode, as well as just talk about all the different changes and things that you can expect around here on the podcast. But yeah, so now the podcast is going to be the Trailblazer Talks with Courtney Hope Jones. That's my new last name, and I have switched it everywhere except the podcast. So I need to update it on the podcast. And yeah, and so basically, let's back up to, I mentioned that we got engaged and that was super awesome. And then my job stuff. So I had been in the corporate world for the past 10 years and basically loved my job. But I always knew probably for the past 5 or 6 years that I eventually wanted to work for myself. And that's always been kind of the goal that I've been working towards, but it just hadn't financially made sense until recently. And it still didn't technically make financial sense fully. There's never a perfect time to leave your corporate salary to work for yourself. But it definitely made more sense just with everything going on in my corporate job. But yeah, basically we got engaged in May of 2023 and then started planning the wedding, realized that we wanted to get married that December. And the main reason for that timing was because of my husband's job and seasonality with his job because he is a college golf coach. And so there's really only 2 times of year where he has off, and that's in like December, January-ish, or like June, July, that time frame. And so we considered the June time frame of like doing the wedding the following June. But the more we thought about it, we're like, we don't really want to wait like over a year to get married. There's just a lot going on. It would just be easier if we got married in December. And so we decided that December was the date. We got married, planned it all. I planned it all, and it was amazing, the best day ever. But before we got married, a lot of changes took place for me and my corporate job. And a lot of hard things happened, a lot of grief happened. I had an amazing boss who I loved dearly, and she was such a champion for me in my career. And she was just a few years older than me, and out of nowhere, she had gone on vacation with her family, and out of nowhere, she had just horrible stomach pain and ended up in the hospital. And they unfortunately discovered that she had a very rare and very severe form of cancer. And it was within a couple months of that. I think she got diagnosed, I want to say, in like July, maybe end of July, early August of 2023. And she was basically out of work, gone for probably a month and a half to 2 months, and they started doing an aggressive form of chemo. She got really sick from the chemo, and she ended up passing away within a couple months of being diagnosed. And that was really, really hard on me because I had an amazing mentor who used to be the head of marketing at the place that I worked and loved her dearly. And she retired in, I think, 2021, just after all the COVID stuff and the pandemic. And that was hard when she left because I knew I wanted to stay there as long as she was there. And I kept kind of looking for jobs. Nothing was really appealing or working out how I wanted it to. So I stayed on, and I stayed on because of my amazing boss, Megan, who I love so much. And then when Megan passed away, I knew it was time for a change. And some really hard things happened with leadership changes in our company and leadership changes in our department. And it just was a really not great culture. And I want to be careful how I talk about it because I loved all my coworkers and had amazing people I worked with and loved the company that I worked for. And I never want to speak ill of anyone, but just the reality too of just going through something that hard, losing a boss who was amazing, losing her in the way that we lost her. She was a friend and a boss to me. And then just the leadership changes that took place after that. It was just really difficult, and the culture just really went down the drain. There was just a lot of, I guess, friction, you could say, with the leadership changes. And it just became a really not great environment for me. I didn't like who I was or how I was with the changes that had taken place, and just the hours I was working. It was crazy hours for no reason. And I had talked to a close friend, and she had a similar situation with kind of a toxic work environment. And she was like, I realized the fruit that I was producing was not the fruit that I was proud to produce in my life. And she's like, I needed a change because I was not operating from the fruits of the Spirit. And I was like, same girl, same. And so I decided, first I was trying to like make a job change before the wedding, and just realized that that did not make sense because I needed to focus on the wedding. And in the midst of that, I also lost another dear friend to cancer, a childhood, lifelong friend. And so there was just a lot of grief and joy at the same time. I was having grief from losing 2 dear loved ones in that season. I was having grief because work was not joyful and it was not what I had hoped it was going to be in that season. But at the same time, it was also supposed to be the most joyful, exciting season of my life, with getting married and being engaged and all that I've ever dreamed of coming to fruition, and God answering so many prayers through that. And so it was just a really difficult season to navigate, of holding both grief and joy and trying to figure out the best way to embrace the season, because the grief was really tearing me apart. I was crying most days about my job. I was frustrated. I was more stressed than I had ever been. I was crying often, and I was just so upset with how things had kind of ended up with my job. But at the same time, I was trying to really enjoy the amazing season that I felt was everything I ever wanted, but I felt like this grief was stealing that season from me. And so I was really wrestling with this at the time of just how do I still enjoy this amazing season of being engaged and getting married and all of that, while also dealing with the feelings of the grief and the anger and frustration that I was feeling with my job. With all of that, it was just really hard to want to write or want to do the podcast or even have time to do the podcast. I honestly didn't even have any spare time between planning the wedding and moving in the midst of that, because we moved to Columbus a few months before the wedding. I moved into the place where we were going to be long term, and my husband, well, at the time fiance, moved into just a small studio, so that he had his space, I had my space before the wedding. So we just had a lot going on with moving and all that. But yeah, God just really did so much through that season. At the same time, I began to realize that a lot of the things I'd been praying for, God was moving me closer to. That dream of wanting to work for myself was starting to come closer to fruition. And I realized as things got really hard in my corporate job, I had prayed so hard. I had been asking God, please open up the doors to a different opportunity. And I had a conversation with, at the time, my fiance, now my husband, and I was crying my eyes out. I was just like, I don't know what to do. I am so frustrated. I'm so upset. I just want a better work environment. I just want something different. And he had asked me if I could do anything, like what would that be? And without skipping a beat, I said working for myself and taking my business full time. And he said, well, let's figure out what that looks like then. And so we got through the wedding. We had an amazing wedding. It was the best day of our lives. We then had an amazing honeymoon in Iceland. And because we got married in December, a couple weeks before Christmas, and we were like, where could we go? My husband's not a big tropical person, and we wanted something outside of the US. And so I had seen some really cool things about Iceland. So we ended up going to Iceland, and it is phenomenal, just an amazing country. We can't wait to go back. But yeah, after we got back from our honeymoon, then we just started getting settled into married life, getting our apartment all in order where he moved into, and all of that, spending time with family for the holidays and stuff. And then things shifted a bit just before our wedding with some leadership changes at work that helped, but it still wasn't amazing. And I knew that it was time to make a serious change. And so again, my husband and I had a conversation and just started talking about, okay, what timing do we think this would look like for me to fully make the switch to taking my business full time? And so we prayed about it. We kept talking about it for a couple months and realized probably like within 6 months, this was doable. And so I remember I was working hard that year, working on both my business and my full-time job. And this is now 2024. And I had consistent clients all year, and we started saving since now we had 2 paychecks basically. We are a DINK household. If you don't know what that is, it's dual income, no kids. And so we started saving part of my salary so that I could have a cushion for going full time with my business. And yeah, we decided that June was the right time frame. I had been so burnt out from my corporate job and just everything that I'd been doing, just emotionally, physically, all the things. And so we decided that I would put in my notice, give a 3-week notice at the beginning of June. And in July, usually every summer, we go to visit family in New England and Rhode Island. And so we decided that July, I would take kind of a mini sabbatical for most of July just to like rest and recuperate and just kind of have a break from work for a bit, because I'd been in the corporate world for over 10 years. And I'd also had my side hustle, which became my full-time business, for the past 6 years. And so we decided to have that mini sabbatical. I kind of arranged everything so that the finances worked out for that, and we were able to go to New England, see our friends and family. Also, we took a mini European vacation and went to Spain and Portugal for like 8 days, I think it was, and it was just so phenomenal, so refreshing, and I was able to start full-time working for myself at the end of July, early August, taking on projects. and I've been working for myself ever since. My business is Little Creative Company, and it's a Squarespace web design business and book design business for difference makers, people who want to make a difference with their business, with their brand, with their books. I help them with creating standout designs that help them reach their dream audience. And it's just been so fulfilling getting to do that. But in the midst of all of these different changes, God has just been reminding me of just his faithfulness and just how much he cares. And I'll back up and tell you guys a little bit of the story too, of kind of how all this came to be. I know I just told you kind of the timeline of it, but I had felt God nudging me to quit my job and work for myself probably around the time that I stopped doing the podcast. I had gone to a conference in New York City at Brooklyn Tabernacle, and it was phenomenal. And the funny part is I almost didn't go to this conference because I had so much going on with work, and I was like, I don't know, I've been to so many church conferences, I don't know that I have time to go to this one. And my mom and my aunt were like, come on, just go with us. I was like, okay. And I remember during one of the prayer times at this conference that I just kind of felt this nudge, I felt like from God, that was like, hey, like, you're eventually going to quit your job. And I was like, cool. Yeah, I do want to quit my job, but I was like, I don't know. Like, is this me just like being burnt out? Is this me just, thinking like, oh, this is what my next step is? But it was kind of just that like that nudge, that burning feeling inside of you that's like, I don't think this is just me. I feel like this is the Holy Spirit. And so I kept praying about it. I kept it to myself. I didn't tell anybody because I was like, people are going to think I'm crazy if I say I'm supposed to quit my job. And I didn't really have a sense of timing yet. I just felt like I needed to quit my job, and I didn't know when. And so I didn't know what the next step was. So I kind of just kept it to myself and just kept praying through it. And then, as you just heard me kind of go through the whole timeline, I felt like things were just getting really uncomfortable for me at my job. And that thought of, I'm supposed to work for myself, I'm supposed to be an entrepreneur, I'm supposed to take this next step finally to fulfill these different dreams that I feel like God has called me to, and all of that. And so that happened. And then as I kept praying through wanting to work for myself, obviously that's a huge step to leave my corporate salary, go from a very nice cushy corporate salary to pretty much nothing other than my cushion of savings. And I wanted to really make sure that this was God and not just me. And so I prayed about it. I sought counsel from my husband, from my mom, from trusted mentors and friends, and really prayed about it. And everyone I talked to just had so much peace about this decision. And I was like, okay, God, this is the biggest trust fall of my life with you, but I am going to trust you, and I am going to do this. And so I kept making the plan, and fast forward, I finally, like I just mentioned, put in my notice in June of 2024. And the rest is kind of history. God has been so faithful, even in the slow months where there's been a couple of months where I didn't have clients, where it was really slow because of the economy. God has been so faithful and just financially providing and the provision for my husband and I, because we definitely need 2 salaries for our household. And God has just been so faithful with that. And he has provided in so many ways. And it's just been such a growth season for me with God, of trusting him and knowing that he's got me. I've been clinging to the verse in Matthew that basically talks about, he provides for the birds and the flowers. Like, how much more will he provide for you? And it's also just been a season of restoration for me. There's been a verse, and I'll pull it up, in Joel 2:25. And it basically says, in Joel 2:25, it says, I will restore to you the years that the swarming locust has eaten, the hopper, the destroyer, the cutter, my great army which I sent along to you. And that verse has been something that I've kind of clung to in this season, because I feel like not that a lot was taken from me, but that was just a really hard season that I went through in 2023. And really since 2020, there's been a lot of hard moments and a lot of things that I just went through with all the different things with my job, and also knowing that I'm called to work for myself and to speak and write and encourage people and be kind of a Bible teacher. And the verse goes on in the next verse in verse 26, it says, "You shall eat in plenty and be satisfied and praise the name of the Lord your God, who has dealt wondrously with you, and my people shall never again be put to shame." And that verse has just been something that I've clung to with walking through holding, grief and joy together. And I think sometimes we go through these different seasons, we have these expectations, and we have this thought of this is how this season's supposed to go. Like, I definitely had that thought with when I got engaged. I was like, this is everything I've dreamed of. I got engaged, I'm planning a wedding, the wedding's gonna be beautiful, all this stuff. So I just expected the rest of my life to be on board with that, and work was gonna be perfect, and I was not gonna have any stress or whatever, and it was just gonna be this beautiful season of just enjoying this thing I had waited so long for. Because before I met my husband, I had been single for I think 7 years, and it was something that I was dreaming of, and I finally met at the time who became my boyfriend and then fiance and now husband. And so this season of wedding planning, I was like, oh, this is gonna be so joyful and amazing. And I just felt like everything that was going on at work and the grief that I was experiencing just stole that from me, as I mentioned earlier. And that was just so hard. And through that season, God reminded me of that verse in Joel. And it basically kind of became this theme of God reminding me, like, hey, I'm going to restore to you the things that felt like they were stolen or taken from you in that season. I'm going to restore to you all the hardship that you have gone through. And he really has, and he's still doing it. And it's been so joyful. And I think sometimes we don't know what to do when we hold two seasons in one. Like when we're holding grief and joy in the same season, we don't really know what to do with that. But God is always so gracious and so faithful to walk with us through both of the seasons at the same time. And it's possible to have both at the same time. And basically, I tell you all of this story, one, just so you know kind of where I've been at, and two, to hopefully encourage you in your own season. If you are walking through something similar and you have grief or anger or joy at the same time, or you're walking through two different things at the same time where you had expectations of how a season was going to go and it didn't quite go how you hoped it would, but yet things were still good, it just wasn't perfect, it's okay. And God sees you in that, and he holds you in that, and he is close to you, and he is with you in that no matter what. And I just hope that, one, us catching up and you kind of hearing my story of what I've walked through the past couple years can be encouraging to you, and know that God cares so deeply. And I know that he held me through that whole season. He helped me to be able to kind of let go so that I could enjoy my wedding and have just an amazing time with my wedding and our honeymoon and everything. And then he held me through the scariness of taking a huge leap of faith to work for myself and to do the thing that was the hardest thing, which is giving up a nice salary to pursue something that some might say I was crazy for. But God has been so faithful in providing for me and my husband in this season of me working for myself, providing clients, and everything has worked out. It may not be perfect. There's definitely been hard times. I've definitely cried at times where I'm like, God, are you sure this is what you called me to? Because it just feels impossible right now. I don't know where my next client's coming from. But he has reignited so many dreams in my heart of things that have just been on the back burner for so long. He's reignited my dreams of writing and the things that I felt called to for so long, of like speaking and writing books and writing blogs and doing the podcast and doing YouTube now and all the different things. And I just feel like he's restoring so much in my heart and in my life. And he's also just provided for us financially, just with my business and with my husband's job and everything. And it's just been so sweet just to see how much God cares, even when you feel like he doesn't care about the small things or whatever. Just leaning on him and not your own understanding, as scripture tells us, is just so freeing. And knowing that he's right there with you and that he's got you in the palm of his hand is just so refreshing and so good. But that's kind of all I have for this episode. I can definitely dig into some of these topics more in future episodes, but I'm excited for season 4. I'm going to have some guest episodes this season, going to have some series like we've been doing. If you're new around here, typically what I like to do is do kind of different series around kind of an overall topic. And then I also like to have different guests on who are blazing trails right where they are, who can encourage us to keep on doing the things that God has called us to do and encourage us in our seasons. So yeah, there's a lot coming down the road that I'm excited for. I'm working on several different projects with writing and with the podcast and several different things that I feel like God has given me vision for this year that I'm super excited to start and dig into. I'm also working on launching a shop on my blog that will have stickers for like your water bottle, computer, that type of stuff. It'll have prints. It will have greeting cards and scripture cards and all kinds of different things that I'm dreaming up. I actually have like a little silhouette machine right behind me that I got for Christmas that I'm excited to start making stickers and different things with to sell on the shop. So stay tuned for that. If you are new to the podcast and this is your first episode listening, make sure that you subscribe. And also, if you want to get on my email list so that you don't miss anything, head over to the links that are in the description and for this episode, and you can sign up for my email list there. And if you haven't yet, ratings and reviews are always so helpful for podcasts. It helps us be able to reach more people and helps the podcast channels show up in more places. And if you're watching this on YouTube, make sure that you like and subscribe, and also leave a comment, because it again helps the algorithms to know, hey, this is something people might want to listen to. But anyways, thank you guys for listening, and I will see you on the next episode.